Alright friends, this video right here is gonna be a big and very interesting one. We're gonna talk about the whole YouTube situation again. I have a lot of new data to present which hints at some very weird behavior. And no, it's not just the same that other people have already mentioned with PC views being down. There's much more that I have for you today. And for all the drama enjoyers among you, I'm also gonna respond to Spiffing Brit, a very large YouTuber who made a video basically saying we're all just imagining that and everything is normal. I'm not a fan of his video, both some of the statements that he makes, but also the way and the tone of the video itself. I think it might be a little bit harmful to the creator space, at least given the information that we have at this point. So, big shoutouts to all our generous channel members as always, and without further ado, let's jump right into it and let me explain which new revelations have come to light over the last few days. But alright, before we get into the new data, I first need to go back to the video that I made a week ago, last Sunday to be precise, because there is a lot about this video that I want to correct, as my assumptions made in that video are most likely incorrect. See, what I said in this video is that views are down. That was the thing that a lot of YouTubers actually noticed. But the main talking point at the time had to do with AI age restriction that YouTube was implementing, plus the infamous restricted mode having been presumably turned on without people's notice, which would then lead to them not seeing certain videos on your channel. That was what most people were assuming at the time, and given the fact that a lot of my recent videos at that point, who I expected to perform much better, specifically the Caliban Prime access, those videos that should have done much better in my opinion, happened to be all restricted, invisible in restricted mode, and at the same time everybody was talking about restricted mode being that big thing that is being turned on, meaning my conclusion was logically that there might be something to it. I didn't definitively say this is the reason, however I did suggest that you double check whether your restricted mode is actually turned on or turned off. Now, since that point, a lot of things have happened. For example, YouTube themselves have responded to this allegation of the restricted mode and they said, no, the overall usage of restricted mode across the platform is like 1%, has been always like this and is still like that. Like they have no data that would suggest that restricted mode has anything to do with that. And at this point, with all the new information that I'm going to present later in this video, I also believe that the restricted mode is not to be blamed for this. I do not believe it anymore, which is also why I privated the old video. So yeah, that would be the correction on my part. Let's now, though, talk about the much more interesting part, and that is the data-driven stuff that is actually going on. I have prepared a lot of different graphs for this video. I've done a lot of YouTube analytics research, and all the graphs, all the different graphs that I've looked at point to one single conclusion. I know other YouTubers have made conclusions about this already. For example, Josh Strive Hayes, he made 2 videos, I think, even about it, saying that specifically computer views are down and all other platforms are just normal, and the suggestion from this being that ad blocker views are not being counted or something. That is also something that I think Linus, if I'm not mistaken, and Bellular News also mentioned in their videos previously. However, I have a lot of other graphs from my own analytics prepared, which hint to a very similar thing, but they drive the point home even more. And that's exactly what I want to show right now. Alright, let us together take a look at my YouTube analytics. Here we are, and I'm about to show you some very interesting things. First of all, these right here are the long-form views only, shorts are completely excluded here, over the last 90 days. We see it up here, the last 3 months, meaning before the quote-unquote incident that happened and after. And as you see, the overall average views are slowly but steadily trending down. Doesn't look all too special just yet, but we're gonna get into it in a second once we open advanced mode. See, what I did here in advanced mode is the same thing that you've probably seen from other YouTubers already. We're looking at the last 90 days, we're looking at only the views, and only the views coming from videos, so shorts and whatever is completely excluded because that's not what we're talking about here. I have sorted these views by device type. So what you're also seeing right here in the background is the blue curve are the views coming from mobile phones, you know, the YouTube app, stuff that you watch on your phone. The green curve is people watching on desktop with your computer. And then we have a yellow curve for TV and tablet, but I'm going to switch those off because they don't matter at this point. What we're looking at here is specifically the phone versus the computer curve. And as we see right here, they have been very, very, very closely aligned and correlated up to one day, that being August the 11th. We're going to keep that date in mind for the rest of the video because it is important. From August the 11th on, we see that those curves are not closely aligned anymore, and actually the computer views are quite a bit lower than the phone views. Interesting. Let's also zoom out to the last 365 days, and that becomes even weirder because what we see right here is, with some very, very few exceptions, computer and phone views have been perfectly aligned up until August 11th, and then even in the zoomed out mode, you see that the computer views are quite a bit lower than they should be according to the trend. So that is the graph that you've seen on many other channels already, and that is perfectly fine. Now, the conclusion from this data that Josh and also others derived was that likely the reason why computer views are down has to do with the fact that maybe YouTube started not counting users that use ad blocker anymore. I mean, it kind of makes sense at first glance because, there is no ad blocker in the mobile YouTube app. You have to watch ads if you watch through that. But on browsers, there is the option to use an ad blocker, meaning that PC would be the only platform where ad blocker views happen in the first place, at least in large scale. And if they were not to be counted, then that would make perfect sense why only the PC views are down, while phone and tablet and TV are basically unchanged. However, the only quote-unquote evidence that I've seen so far to back that up is exactly this graph right here that shows that the computer views are down. However, what if I told you that I have many, many more graphs suggesting the same thing from different angles, and that is exactly what I want to show you now. First of all, let's take a look at all my uploads right here. Let's go on a video-to-video basis. Let's compare uploads that have happened before August the 11th to uploads that have happened after August the 11th. And believe me, I'm onto something here. Just bear with me for a second. Let's take, for example, this video right here. The only rifle you'll ever need was a pretty successful one, right? My burst on in Conan video, I uploaded this in July, so before August 11th. Let's go into the detailed analytics on this video. What we're doing right here is, we are going to compare the first 24 hours. We are looking for specifically the views versus the monetized views, which we find right... Where is it? There, the estimated monetized playbacks. We're comparing the estimated monetized playbacks versus the actual views. Now, before we jump into this analysis, I need to make some definitions very, very clear because otherwise you might come to wrong conclusions. A view on YouTube is anyone that has clicked on your video where at least the playback of the video has started. An estimated monetized playback is a view where the viewer has seen at least one ad. So if you click on a video and you see an ad right away, that's one view and one estimated monetized playback. When you see multiple advertisements in the same video, that's still only one estimated monetized playback because it does only count the views that have seen ads. It does not count the number of ads served in total. That is a different metric that YouTube also counts. If you want to look at that, there is something like it. But we are specifically comparing the number of total views versus the number of views that have been estimated monetized playbacks, aka the portion of the total views where people have seen ads. See, what we have right here is a development that is pretty usual for my channel. We have a total of 55,466 views. That's the total views that the video got in the first 24 hours after upload. And out of these total views, roughly 40K were estimated monetized playbacks, meaning we have around about 15,000 people who clicked the video but did not see an ad, either because they were on PC and using ad blocker, or because they saw a ad on another video, then clicked onto mine, and YouTube just didn't play one right again. Let's take a look at another video. This is my Necros video, also from before August the 11th, and we see something very similar here. 35,500 views in the first 24 hours, 28.7 thousand of which are monetized. In general, across my channel, there is roughly a 60 to 70% ratio of the total views that are monetized playbacks. The rest is, people using adblock mostly. And this is consistent across all the videos happening before August the 11th. Just to be sure, we can take a look at another one. We can take a look at Wisp. That's been quite a long time ago already. And here we have 37,000 views, 25,000 of which are estimated monetized playbacks. I'm, of course, not going to show you the entire archive of my videos. I just hope you understand the point. Kind of makes sense, right? Total views is higher, estimated monetized playbacks is lower because people are using adblock. However, it gets very interesting once we take a look at the recent videos on the channel after August the 11th. Let's take a look at my Phantasma video from this week. In the first 24 hours, 28,000 total views, 24,000 of which are estimated monetized playbacks. So the ratio is approaching 100%. That is unusually high. That's a lot of people not using adblock. Thank you all for turning off adblock. That's so nice of you. Yeah, you can tell that's probably not the reason, right? Let's take a look, and this is the funny part, at my Platinum guide. 28,700 views in total, out of which 29,000 are monetized playbacks. So yeah, that is weird, right? If a monetized view happens if a viewer sees an ad, then how is it possible that I have more monetized views than total views? That can't be. Theoretically, it cannot be possible that you have more monetized views than actual views. And that's not the only video. Let's take a look at the Plague Star guide. Here we have 67,000 views, 75,000 of which are monetized views. That is so interesting. And it further, sort of suggests the same point that other YouTubers were making with unmonetized views just not being counted, right? If, for whatever reason, people using adblock stopped showing up in the view figure, then that would make sense, right? That would suggest that the actual number of total views was much higher, because how else would I have more monetized views than actual views? This is a statistic that I haven't seen from any other channel before, and I've compared quite some videos, and every single time it's either close to 100% or over 100%, like also here with my Caliban guide. Of course, the amount of data that I have here is very limited because there are not that many videos that I uploaded after August the 11th, but it suggests that, the total number of views kind of should be higher to justify the amount of monetized views that are being counted. And I have even more. See, one argument that YouTube themselves have made, and also the Spiffing Brit, the YouTuber I'm gonna respond to at the end of the video, he also said that is that this whole anomaly in the data is no bug. It's not counting views differently. All this is just an imagination that we're having. It's kids going back to school. It's parents coming back to work. It's, other big game releases maybe taking away viewership from the game that you're covering. We're imagining this and we're just panicking for no reason. And I think this assumption is wrong. Let me explain what I mean. Let's quickly go back to the graph that we've seen before, views coming from different device types. See, the main argument that both YouTube themselves are making, plus also what Spiffing Brit is saying, is that it's parents going back to work, it's kids going back to school. We're just imagining this. It's not happening. And I think this conclusion is phenomenally wrong, and let me hammer that home even more. Sure, this right here is the view data graph. And technically, if you were to suspect that it is down to people going back to school and work, then this would actually make kind of sense, right? If you're at school or at work, you can't watch on your computer as much anymore, but you still have your phone with you. So you could watch YouTube on your phone while you're at work or at school, which would explain why the phone views are unaffected, but the computer views are down. Makes sense, right? However, that is only until you take the TV into the mix as well. The TV views have remained very stable compared to before, right? It's just the computer views, just the green curve going down, not the TV curve. So explain to me why, if people going to school is the explanation, then why do they watch the same amount of TV as before? And if you don't believe me, let's take a look at a different graph. Let's instead take a look at not the views, but instead take a look at the impressions. Impressions being not when somebody clicks on the video, but just when my thumbnails or my videos show up somewhere in somebody's feed. Just in general, how many eyeballs my video have been suggested to. That's the impressions. And when we see that right here, then we also have a relatively strong correlation between the phone and the phone and the computer curve. The phone curve being a bit higher, but the computer curve being roughly, at the same distance from the phone curve as usual. And when we take a look at August the 11th here, then what we're seeing is that the computer impressions and the phone impressions, they're just like before. They don't seem any different, right? There are the same amount of computer eyeballs on my videos as there are before. It's just that for some reason, while there are the same amount of eyeballs on the content, this results in lower views on the content. Still, let's compare it one-to-one. Look at this right here, August the 11th. View graph, impression graph. View graph, impression graph. To me, the impression graph looks absolutely normal, while the view graph is lower on the PC side, and you can't argue against that. That's just the data we're seeing here. The data speaks for itself. Now, you might say, well, people on the PC might just not have clicked all that much anymore from August 11th on, which sounds like a bit of a constructed argument, but you know what? We have the data on that as well. Let's take a look at the click-through rate and see if it is really the case that just PC users stopped watching compared to all the other devices. So, what are we having here? The blue click-through rate is the percentage of people watching on their phone that click on my videos, whereas the green one is the percentage clicking on the PC. And what we're seeing right here from August the 11th on is that not only did the PC click-through rate not drop, it actually increased a little bit. So what we're seeing here is that the PC viewers get the same amount of impressions, so the same amount of viewers are there. They're clicking even more on my videos, and I'm getting less views from the PC still. How is that conclusive in any way? How does that suggest that this is just the normal ebb and flow of the people using YouTube? I do not believe it. Now, let me be perfectly 100% honest here. We just took a look at a lot of data, and all that this data is suggesting is that PC views, and only PC views, are not being counted the way they are before. I cannot think of any explanation as to why in specific the views coming from the computers are going down when the impressions on computers are unchanged, the click-through rate on computers is unchanged to maybe even higher, and there's still fewer views. I cannot explain to myself how I'm having more monetized playbacks than actual views on some videos. And the only explanation that I can find for this, the only explanation that I can draw from this amount of data is the same that everybody else has, that being that YouTube views on the computer are not being counted the same way as they were before August 11th. Now, what does this all mean now? First of all, everybody who's saying that YouTube purposely changed the way that views are counted and just gaslights us all into, no, we haven't changed anything, I don't think that holds true actually. Because even though, YouTube is like the big, evil mega corporation, right? I actually think that YouTube is quite a creator-friendly platform if you compare it to its peers, like Twitch, for example, where terms of service are being applied based on personal sympathy. You have Kick, which is just a casino hell with a lot of shady people on there. You have TikTok, which is a completely inconsistent mess. And in general, YouTube have always tried to be as transparent and as fair with their creators as possible. Yes, there are exceptions to this. Yes, I'm not saying that YouTube is perfect, But in general, when they roll out big changes, they do communicate that. They do try to communicate that as clearly as possible long before it happens. If they were, again, make a drastic change, like, hey, if you're using an app block, you're not being counted anymore. If they did that on purpose, they would have mentioned something. What instead, I personally am believing is that they did change something, maybe they had an AI involved in this change or whatever, and that this views being counted differently is just an unintended side effect to whatever it was that they are doing, and the reason why they're not confirming it is that they're still having to do their own research on the back end on what is actually going on, and that they're not communicating anything until they can give a definite answer. But alright, that was my data, that was my conclusion, but as I said in the intro of the video, for all you drama lovers out there, we're also going to react to the Spiffing Brit, a large YouTuber with over 4 million subscribers, who made a video on the situation basically saying this is not happening and we are just imagining this. It's normal viewing patterns. And I want to react to some of the statements that he made in his video because I fundamentally disagree with it. Let's jump right into it. First of all, one thing I want to point out is that Spiff is actually quite knowledgeable on how the YouTube algorithm works. He's made multiple videos about how he used certain inconsistencies in the algorithm to break the very YouTube algorithm to get millions of views that he shouldn't have gotten. It's a great watch. I've enjoyed all of these videos, right? And that means that Spiff is seen as a huge authority when it comes to YouTube affairs. The reason why I'm pointing this out is because that makes it even more harmful when he denies that all the data that I have presented, that others have presented too, are just, standard stuff without delivering a satisfying explanation, right? If some large YouTuber like him, who is known to have a large authority about YouTube affairs, if he makes those statements, that is like a slap in the face when you're clearly seeing something else in your own data. And now we're going to take a look at this very video right here. Now, we're of course not going to watch the entire 23-minute long video because that would be crazy, and most of the statements that he makes in this, I actually do agree with, and they are reasonable. I want to point out just the few ones which I fundamentally disagree with. I'm going to put you a link to his video in the description down below so you can watch it for yourself in its entirety. I highly suggest doing that actually, so to form your own opinion on who might be right or wrong in this. What I want to look at in specific is this right here. First of all, he's talking about that it's not restricted mode. He goes in length about how restricted mode is not to be blamed, and I totally agree. The next thing I see here is a bit bothersome for me because what he says is,
so if not restricted mode, there are a few other things I've seen creators blame for this decline. Let's start with shadow banning.
Shadow banning is a term as old as time. People on YouTube always talk about, oh, my channel is shadow banned whenever they get lower views and can't explain why. And I agree with Spiff. It is freaking ridiculous. Something like shadow banning does not happen on YouTube. It has never happened on YouTube. And everybody who claims that genuinely shadow banning is happening to their channel has no idea what they're talking about. However, the reason why I take offense in him, putting that into the video right here is that, to my knowledge, none of the larger, more established, more credible channels that have been talking about this whole YouTube situation, none of them, to my knowledge, have ever genuinely mentioned something like shadow banning. Josh hasn't said that, Bellula hasn't said that, Linus hasn't said that. None of the big channels raising concerns have mentioned shadow banning. Raising this as a talking point among the other talking points that the larger, more established channels have raised kind of sort of sounds like a strawman argument, right? It kind of suggests that this is something that's genuinely being talked about when this is just not the case, and it kind of sort of discredits these other channels. Why even bring it up in the first place? Up next, we have...
If not shadow banning, then what about hype? This is
the hype feature. YouTube has introduced a new feature. It's like a hype feature where smaller channels, right, channels under 500,000 subscribers, their community can like hype their videos to get them, promoted or something. I'm just gonna play you some B-roll from his channel in the background. Long story short, I have heard it be mentioned, but I think everybody mostly agrees that it's probably not because of the hype feature. If, hype was really putting smaller channels above the bigger channels, then what we should be seeing in the data is that, impressions of smaller channels are high, therefore impressions of bigger channels are low. As you saw in my data, my impressions are not low, so it's likely not that other videos are pushing my videos out of the frame, right? I think most other established channels also disagree with the fact that hype genuinely has something to do with it. So yeah, agree with Spiff on this here, hype is also not the culprit. However, while I do agree with most of the stuff that has been said in the video to this point, the next one is a little bit weird, because that is exactly the one thing that everybody is being talking about and that everybody's data kinda sorta seems to suggest.
Another thing I've seen blamed is that YouTube has changed the way views are tracked. The idea being that creators are getting the same amount of real views, but perhaps the botted or duplicated views of previous videos have been removed. This was actually a very strong.
The views being not counted is what the data suggests. However, the fact that it's botted or autoplay views which are being taken out of the picture, it's possible, but the stats on monetized playbacks versus non-monetized playbacks kind of sort of suggest that it has to do with specifically that, views that are not monetized being not counted. I'm not necessarily saying he's wrong here. It might have to do with the autoplay too. Who knows, right? I'm not an expert on this either. I just wanted to make that clear.
Talking point of the Linus Tech Tips videos, and they're not without good reason. These changes do happen with YouTube, and in fact, we recently had one with Shorts changing to fit the TikTok.
That is the thing that I previously mentioned, right? YouTube changing the way that shorts are being counted. They clearly communicated that before it happened. So also here, one more reason to believe that it's not a purposeful thing that YouTube does. Otherwise, they would have announced it in some form beforehand.
Approach to counting a view as seeing a single mere frame of a video, but it only affects shorts and not normal videos.
Yeah, that's also why we filtered out the shorts in our analytics entirely, because they have nothing to do with this whole topic that we're discussing. To my knowledge, shorts are completely unaffected since August 11th.
It's a change to display, not to the actual algorithm. I also know that no change has been made to the YouTube view counting and verification in the period that these creators are discussing.
You know that it's not happening? Interesting.
This confirmation comes from multiple sources that work at YouTube who know far more about this than anyone else on the planet. Okay, so all.
Now, let me quickly put that away. So Spiff says that basically what others have been pointing out, what also my data hints at, that this is not happening because he's heard it from people working at YouTube. And I'm not even gonna, doubt that. I'm pretty sure somebody as large as him will have connections at YouTube directly. But what I harshly criticize about his video is that this is his entire argument for the view counter, right? He does not refer to any data, even though all the data is suggesting that this very thing is happening. He's just saying, well, YouTube says it's not happening. I've heard it. Trust me, bro. It's not that. And goes on to the next topic. And I think this is bad. I'm not saying that this is definitely 100% happening. I'm just saying that my data and everybody else who's talked about its data, that is all suggesting that this is happening, right? The data speaks for itself. So the logical conclusion would be either the data is bugged and needs to be corrected, or that the view counting is actually different, or that the view counting is not different, and Spiff is completely right, but then there needs to be a good explanation for why specifically PC views are being down, why we're having more monetized views than total views, why PC views are down, but PC impressions and click-through rate is the same as before. It does not make sense. Dear Spiff, if for whatever reason you actually end up seeing this video, I'm not trying to trash talk you. I actually quite like the stuff that you're putting out. I'm watching a lot of your videos and I like them. But if you're claiming you're all being wrong about this, trust me bro, YouTube told me, then please give us an explanation that properly explains why the data is looking this way, and give us another good reason why it is. If YouTube themselves say, hey, PC views are being down especially because of this, maybe like a giant power cut in the US since August 11th or whatever, then that's perfectly fine. I'm gonna be the first one to withdraw my previous conclusion and agree with that. But till this point, there hasn't been any satisfying explanation for why we are seeing this. And the last thing I want to talk about today is, if it is really true that ad blocker views are not being counted, then why the fuzz? Because if only the views that don't make you money anyway are not being counted, then that means you're making the same money as before and it's not going to put you into financial risk. So why worry about it in the first place? And that is a valid question. However, while others have said that the amount of monetized views, the amount of money that they make is unchanged, I can't really say that for myself. The income that my channel has made has gone down, just like the views have gone down. There might be 1,000 reasons for why that is, so I'm not saying it is or is not the case. However, one definite reason as to why this is still a problem are sponsorships. Because a lot of sponsorship deals don't pay you a flat rate for, advertising their product in the video. They also pay you by views, meaning the more views your video gets, the more the sponsor will pay you for the integration in your video. And in that sense, it is actually really bad if people are watching the video, but it doesn't show up in the views, because that directly means, ad blocker or not, the YouTuber makes less money. And that is also why videos like Spiff's one, where he says you're all wrong about it, it's not happening, without giving clear evidence that suggests this, why these videos are harmful, because the company can go and say, well, look at this video, this very knowledgeable guy says you're just imagining this. No, we're gonna pay you less because you're getting less views. That's all your fault. Again, not saying that the view counter is definitely broken, just saying that is what the data suggests, and it is harmful when you're having these types of sponsorship deals, which are actually quite common. But yeah, that will be my rant session for today. I hope this gave you some clarity on what is currently going on. I don't have a satisfying conclusion. I'm just gonna have to keep doing whatever I'm doing best, just like everybody else, and hope that this is gonna get resolved hopefully sooner than later. Thank you again all so much for your immense support that you have shown me and other channels since that whole issue has come up. We're gonna see each other in the next one, which is probably gonna be very soon. Another massive shout out to Niels V, Demon Lord Sale, Demon Emperor, Prime, Nos, Linux, Gaming Turtle, PR, Undercounty 2, Skylar, Bowser, Me, Hockey, Phil the Meme, Socrates, The Almighty Rat, Leo, Murasaki, Shadow, Lockhart, Hair, Antares, Pater, Satyr, Trollalox, and Boomia1, Mr. Games Play, Zave, and all other generous channel members for your support. Peace out. I don't want to talk anymore today.